Hello there, seeker of silence, and welcome to this gentle corner of the realms, where wandering hearts find rest and old stories glow like embers beneath soft winter light. If these quiet tales bring you peace and help you drift into the deep, warm places of sleep, feel free to subscribe, so that our fellowship of dreamers may continue to grow, each of us finding comfort in the hush of shared imagination. For now, let the world outside grow still, as the snow settles deeper along the lonely roads of Icewind Dale, and let your breathing fall into a slow, steady rhythm, soft and patient, like a lantern's glow in a forgotten hallway. Tonight, we turn our quiet steps toward a remote tavern tucked between two frostbitten ridges, a sturdy refuge of timber and stone, where the winter wind curls gently around shuttered windows, and where travelers, tired, curious, and quietly hopeful, gather to share the lore that flickers between the edges of memory and myth. The tavern is called the Snowbound Hearth, a place known only to those who have wandered far beyond the maps drawn in warmer lands. Its sign, an iron lantern surrounded by drifting snowflakes, swings with a slow creak whenever the wind sighs across the valley. Inside, everything glows with the tender warmth of firelight. Oak beams darkened by age stretch across the low ceiling, and the scent of pine logs and dried herbs lingers peacefully in the air. As we step across the threshold, a gentle murmur of voices weaves through the room, like threads of wool in a winter cloak. Somewhere near the back, a quill moves softly across parchment, its delicate scratches forming a rhythm as old and comforting as snowfall. A distant kettle simmers on the stove, releasing small clouds of fragrant steam, a mixture of winter mint, clover, and mountain moss. And just beneath the hearth's steady crackling, one can hear the quiet breath of the world settling into night. A group of adventurers has taken shelter here, their cloaks heavy with snow, their boots lined with frost that melts slowly onto the wooden floorboards. They are wanderers of many lands and many fates, but for this evening, they are simply guests of the storm, gathered around a round table polished smooth by time. There is a dwarf historian whose beard is braided with tiny bronze rings, each engraved with the crest of a different clan he once visited. There is an elven cartographer, wrapped in layers of soft green wool, her eyes shimmering like pale moonlight as she studies a weathered map. A quiet human mage warms his hands near the fire, pages of an old spellbook resting gently on his lap. And a halfling herbalist, small, cheerful, and smelling faintly of honeysuckle, arranges tiny glass jars along the table, each filled with dried leaves that whisper when he opens them. None of them speak loudly. In the snowbound hearth, loudness feels as out of place as thunder in a library. Instead, their voices drift softly, as though the tavern itself encourages calm reflection. The dwarf historian lifts a small, leather-bound journal, its surface smooth from years of gentle handling. "Icewind Dale holds more stories than stars in the winter sky," he murmurs, his voice deep but slow, carrying the warmth of smouldering coals. Most lost, some whispered, and a few waiting to be told again. He turns a page and the sound, quiet, delicate, joins the fire's crackle in a peaceful symphony. The elven cartographer leans closer, her breath forming a faint cloud in the cold air near the window. Outside, the snow continues to fall, each flake touching the glass with a sound so soft it is almost felt rather than heard. The human mage smiles gently, closing his eyes as though he can sense the old tales stirring. "I have always believed," he says, "that stories told in winter find deeper roots in the heart. The cold makes the mind still, and in stillness, truth can finally whisper." The halfling nods eagerly, shaking a small jar filled with crushed lavender. "Nothing warms a long night like a good tale," he says, his voice bright but gentle, "especially the strange ones." the ones we don't hear on well-traveled roads. A log in the hearth shifts, sending a wave of golden sparks upward, and the scent of warm pine drifts through the room like a comforting blanket. Beyond the tavern walls, the winter wind whispers against the stones, a low, distant sound that feels almost like a lullaby. And so, with the storm deepening outside and the fire humming softly within, the adventurers settle into their chairs, wrap their hands around warm wooden mugs, and begin to share the obscure lore and quiet mysteries that wander through Icewind Dale like gentle spirits of snow and silence. Tonight we sit with them. Tonight we listen. The dwarf historian is the first to speak, as dwarves often are when ancient lore is waiting just beyond the edge of memory. He leans back in his chair, the sturdy wood creaking softly beneath him, and lets his eyes drift toward the window where snowflakes gather like pale runes upon the glass. "You ever hear," he begins slowly, "of the whispering stones of the Reged Glacier?" His voice is deep and even, moving with the careful cadence of one who respects the stories he carries. The fire crackles in agreement, soft pops of pine resin rising like sparks in the quiet air. The others exchange small, curious glances. The elven cartographer tilts her head, the silvery ends of her hair catching warm firelight. "I know the glacier well," she murmurs, "but no stones that whisper." "That," the dwarf replies with a gentle chuckle, "is because those who hear them rarely speak of it. Some fear it, some revere it, most never understand it at all." He lifts his journal, running a finger along its edge, feeling the texture of the leather, softened by the constant touch of his hands. The tale is old, older than the 10 towns, older than the tribes of the tundra, older even than the first dwarves who tunneled into the spine of the world. A long silence follows, not tense or anticipatory, but warm and inviting, a quiet that welcomes the shaping of ancient words. "At the far northeastern rim of the glacier," the dwarf continues, "there lies a small formation of stones. Nothing remarkable at first glance, just a curve of frost-covered boulders pressing up against the endless white. But when the wind moves just right and the ice settles after dusk, the stones begin to hum. Softly. So softly you're not sure you heard anything at all." The halfling herbalist shivers, though the tavern remains warm. "A hum? Like singing?" "Not quite," the dwarf answers, his tone growing even gentler. "More like a memory of singing, as though the earth remembers a song no one else does anymore." The human mage lets out a slow breath, fog forming near the surface of his mug. "I've heard legends of places like that," he says softly. "Corners of the world where the weave pools quietly, unshaped, unspoken, and the land itself holds old thoughts." The dwarf nods. "Aye. The whispering stones are said to echo with the voices of those who crossed the glacier long before our time. Travelers lost to snow, wanderers seeking refuge, even entire clans driven away by storms no hearth could endure." He pauses to take a sip of warm, mulled drink, and for a moment, the only sound is the tavern's fire, its crackling steady and comforting. Outside, the winter wind brushes against the stone walls, a deep and distant murmur that almost feels like part of the story itself. "But here's the strange bit," the dwarf continues, lowering his voice to a soft rumble. "The stones don't whisper the same to everyone. Some hear gentle humming. Some hear words in languages they don't know. Some hear footsteps behind them, soft and distant, though no one is ever there." The elven cartographer raises an eyebrow. "And what did you hear?" A smile softens the dwarf's expression. "My clan believes every traveler hears what their heart is ready to hear. For me it was a low hum, steady as the heartbeat of the mountain, a sound so peaceful, so ancient, that it felt less like hearing something and more like remembering it. The mage leans forward slightly, the soft rustle of his robes joining the fire's rhythm. That is no small thing. Places like that are often gateways, not literal ones, but gateways of understanding. The world speaks quietly. Most of us never listen long enough to hear it. A log shifts in the hearth, sending a warm glow across the tavern floor. Someone in a distant corner turns a page, and the soft, crisp sound weaves seamlessly into the stillness. The elven cartographer rests her fingertips on her map, tracing a thin, careful path across the pale blue ink. "I've traveled near that region," she says in a whisper, "but I never saw stones like those. Perhaps they hide themselves from those who rush. Icewind Dale requires patience." "Aye," the dwarf agrees. "Everything ancient does." Another silence passes, long, comfortable, filled with unspoken reflection. The storm outside deepens, snow swirling like drifting ash from a celestial fire. The tavern embraces the night, its wooden beams humming softly with warmth and age. Then gently, the halfling herbalist clears his throat. "I've never seen any magical stones," he says, his voice light and warm. "But I have heard a strange winter herb tale from the tundra gatherers near Lonelywood." The cartographer smiles. "Oh, a herb tale? Those are always delightful." The halfling beams, his eyes sparkling in the firelight. "This one involves a plant that only grows when the aurora spills green light upon fresh snow." The dwarf chuckles. "Now that sounds like a tale worth hearing." The halfling nods, his fingers tracing the rim of a small glass jar. "It's called the Evermoss Lantern, and the story says—" But before he continues, the tavern door groans softly as a draught of cold air wanders in, bringing with it the faint scent of frost and pine. No one turns to look. In the snowbound hearth, the night enters gently, as though it too seeks refuge from the storm, and the halfling begins his quiet tale. The halfling herbalist cups the small glass jar in both hands, as though it holds something fragile, something that remembers the hush of winter nights far beyond these tavern walls. He breathes in the faint scent of the dried leaves within, a mixture of mint, moss, and something softer, like the memory of warm earth beneath cold snow. "Well," he begins gently, his voice bright yet soothing, "the Evermoss Lantern isn't really a lantern at all, not in the way a traveler might imagine. It doesn't glow by flame, and it doesn't hum like runestones. Its light is quieter, more like a soft promise than an actual brightness." He taps the jar lightly with a fingertip. Inside, the dried strands shift with a delicate whisper, like parchment brushing against itself. The sound blends peacefully with the tavern's fire, which crackles with patient warmth. "The tundra gatherers say," he continues, "that the Evermoss only appears in the deepest weeks of winter, when the snow is untouched and the cold is so still you can hear the faint echo of your own breath lingering in the silence." The mage closes his eyes as though picturing the moment. Outside, the wind sighs softly, rustling against the tavern walls in long, distant currents. "It grows," the halfling says, "only where the aurora lays its brightest green upon the snow." The moss takes in the light, drinks it like a gentle tonic, and for a few heartbeats it glows. The cartographer's expression softens, a smile touching her lips. "I've seen the aurora dance above the tundra," she whispers. "If a plant were to bloom beneath that light, I imagine it would be a beautiful sight." "Oh, it is," the halfling replies. "Or so the gatherers say." A field of tiny green sparks, glimmering like resting fireflies, lying so close to the snow that you have to kneel and bring your face just inches from the ground to see them clearly. He leans back, eyes drifting toward the hearth, where a log settles with a gentle pop. The glow doesn't last long, maybe the length of a deep breath or two, maybe a bit more if the night is calm. But once the aurora fades, the Evermoss Lantern disappears, melting back into the snow as though it was never there. The dwarf strokes his beard slowly, bronze rings glinting in the firelight. "A fleeting thing, then," he murmurs. "Most good things are," the halfling replies softly. A warm silence settles between them. There is something soothing about the idea of a plant that glows only in the presence of the dancing sky. After a moment, the human mage opens his spellbook, its old pages releasing a faint scent of ink and cedar. "I've read of similar phenomena," he says quietly. "Herbs and fungi that react to the weave, not through magic cast by hands, but through the natural breath of the world itself." He turns a page slowly, the sound gentle, crisp, and the fire crackles in rhythmic harmony. "But the Evermoss lantern," he continues, "is said to carry more than light. Some claim that when it glows it reveals impressions, not visions exactly, but soft impressions of memories left behind by ancient wanderers." The cartographer's eyes widen slightly. "Memories? From whom?" He shrugs with a peaceful smile. "No one knows. Some say they are memories of the land itself. Some say they're echoes of sylvan spirits watching over the tundra. Others believe they are the last quiet thoughts of those who once lay beneath the snow long, long ago." The tavern grows still. A wooden mug is set down gently somewhere in the room. A traveler near the hearth shifts in their chair, a soft rustle of wool against wood. The wind outside drifts lower, like a tired singer humming the final notes of a song. The halfling closes his jar with a soft, satisfying click. "You can't harvest the glow," he says gently, "and anyone who tries to grasp the moss while it shines finds only cold snow in their hand. But if you sit quietly enough, if you breathe slowly and peacefully, the moss will remember you." The dwarf tilts his head. "Remember you? In what way?" "Oh," the halfling answers with a small smile, "in the way all gentle things remember. If you return to that same patch of snow on another winter night, and if the aurora graces it again, the glow seems a little brighter, a little warmer, a little more familiar." The mage chuckles softly. "That sounds less like herb lore," he says, "and more like companionship." "Perhaps," the halfling murmurs. "The tundra is a lonely place. Even plants learn to greet familiar travelers." A soft wave of laughter drifts around the table, low, warm, and peaceful. In the snowbound hearth, joy never comes loudly. It glows quietly, like a bed of embers beneath fresh logs. Then the cartographer folds her map carefully, the parchment bending with a whisper. "My turn," she says gently. "I have a tale not of herbs, but of footprints." Her voice lowers, not with tension but with reverence, the kind that appear on the ice where no living creature has walked for centuries. The fire crackles. A page turns in someone's book. The snow presses gently against the window. And slowly the cartographer begins her story. The elven cartographer rests her palms softly on the table, her fingertips brushing faint traces of frost left behind by travelers who entered the tavern earlier. Her movements are slow, almost ceremonial, as though the story she is preparing to tell deserves the same quiet reverence one gives to old maps or fading starlight. "When I was charting the northern reaches," she begins in a soft, melodic whisper, "I came upon a glacier shelf so silent, so impossibly still, that even the wind seemed hesitant to cross it. The others leaned closer, not out of urgency, but from that gentle curiosity that grows in warm places during long winter nights. This glacier," she continues, "is known to some as the Mirror of Ages, a name not used by many, for very few have walked its surface. It lies beyond the Raighead trails, past the frozen crests where travelers seldom bother to go. But I had been mapping the ridgeline, and so I found myself there one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the spine of the world." She pauses, recalling the distant image. Her eyes glimmer with the memory, like frost catching firelight. "The ice," she says softly, "was so smooth that it reflected the sky with perfect clarity. I felt as though I were walking not atop a glacier, but between two heavens, one above me, one beneath me." A soft crackle from the hearth fills the momentary silence, its gentle rhythm blending with the whisper of winter wind creeping along the stone walls. "At first," she continues, "there was nothing unusual about the place, just a vast mirror of frozen blue and pale silver. But as twilight deepened, I noticed something strange. Far across the glacier was a line of footprints." The dwarf lifts a brow. "Footprints? From what kind of creature?" The cartographer exhales slowly. "To this day, I do not know. The prints were long, too long for any beast native to Icewind Dale, and spaced in a manner that suggested deliberate, unhurried steps." The mage leans forward, elbows resting on his spellbook. "Human, perhaps?" She shakes her head gently. "No. They were too deep for a person, too wide, too ancient." Her voice settles into an even softer murmur. "What troubled me most was not their size, but their warmth." The halfling blinks, puzzled. "Warmth? On a glacier?" "Yes," the elf replies. "When I approached the first print, I could see the ice had melted slightly within its center. Only a little, just enough for a thin trickle of water to run outward like a tiny, delicate stream. I touched the edge of the print, and though my gloves were thick, I felt a faint, gentle heat." The dwarf strokes his beard. "That is no natural thing," he murmurs. "No," she agrees, "it was not." The tavern quiets further, as though even the fire has softened its crackling to listen. "The print stretched on for nearly a mile," the cartographer continues, moving steadily toward the horizon. "They never deviated, never hesitated. They simply walked, one after another, into the fading twilight." She breathes in, the scent of pine and warm herbs filling her lungs. And what is stranger still was that the prints were fresh. Not a single snowflake had fallen into them. Not a single gust of wind had disturbed their shape. "Were you alone?" the mage asks quietly. "Yes," she replies. "And in that immense silence, standing upon the mirror of ages, I felt the peculiar sensation that the glacier itself was remembering something." As though the ice had chosen, for a moment, to hold on to a memory instead of letting it fade. A page turns somewhere in the tavern, soft, crisp, and somehow calming. Someone stirs a warm drink, wooden spoon tapping gently against the mug. She continues in a breathy whisper. "I followed the prints until the light grew too dim for safe travel. When I returned the next morning, they were gone." "Gone how?" the halfling asks. "Gone," she repeats softly. "The ice was pristine, smooth as glass. No sign of melting, no cracks beneath the surface, no indentation at all." The dwarf's eyes widen. "Then perhaps the ice repaired itself." "Perhaps," the elf whispers. "Or perhaps the prints were never meant for daylight." She folds her hands neatly in her lap. "Some of the old northern tribes believe the Mirror of Ages does not reflect the present, but the past. They say that on certain nights, when the world grows quiet enough, the glacier reveals the movements of travelers long gone. Not ghosts, not spirits, just memories, held gently for a brief moment before the ice decides to rest again." The mage smiles faintly, his eyes soft. "There is a kind of peace in that, isn't there? The past walking beside us now and then, leaving only whispers for those with patient hearts." "Indeed," the elf replies slowly. "I felt no fear, only calm, a deep, quiet calm that settled in my bones like warm tea on a frozen morning." The fire shifts once more, sending a faint scent of cedar into the room. The storm outside deepens, snow pressing softly against the window pane with a muffled hush. The table falls blissfully silent for a long moment, not from uncertainty, but from the gentle weight of wonder. Then the mage, still seated near the hearth, his spellbook resting lightly on his lap, lifts his gaze. "I have a tale," he says in a near whisper, "from the archives of East Haven. A tale of a sound that appears only once each winter. A sound not meant to frighten, but to lull the soul into a deeper kind of stillness." The others turn toward him, their expressions serene, their breaths slow and steady. And with a quiet smile, the mage begins. The mage lifts his mug gently, letting the warm steam drift upward, curling like soft parchment smoke into the hush of the snowbound hearth. His eyes half close, remembering as though the tale he carries rests not in his mind but somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath the steady rhythm of breath. "In East Haven's old archives," he begins softly, "there is a passage few ever read. A small note, nearly hidden in the margins of a frost-worn ledger. Its ink is faded, pale as dawnlight on new snow. Most archivists overlook it." He taps the side of his mug gently, the faint wooden thud blending seamlessly with the fire's quiet crackle. "But the note speaks of something called the winter chime." The halfling tilts his head, curiosity brightening his features. "A chime? Like a bell?" The mage shakes his head slowly. "No, not metal, not crystal, not something forged. The winter chime is not made, it is heard." A whisper of wind drifts across the tavern roof, sliding down the walls like a quiet sigh. "It is said," the mage continues, "that on one night each winter, as the cold reaches its deepest stillness, a sound rings across the tundra. Soft, pure, barely more than a breath of melody. Some say it begins in the mountains, others insist it comes from the frozen lakes. But the note, the chime sound is always the same." He sets his mug down gently. A soft, warm thud. The fire pops, a single spark floating upward before fading. "They describe it," he whispers, "as a single tone, clearer than ice, gentler than snow, rising for only a few heartbeats before fading back into silence. Not loud, not startling, just present. Like a thought one nearly remembers but cannot hold." The dwarf frowns thoughtfully. "What causes it?" "No one knows," the mage replies kindly. "But the margin note suggests it is the land itself releasing tension, a vast stretch of frozen world settling into its deepest rest." He lifts his spellbook, turning a page with slow care, the soft rasp of parchment sliding beneath his fingertips. "The note reads," he murmurs, "when the chime rings, the dale breathes." The cartographer smiles softly. A poetic archivist. "Indeed," the mage says, his voice warm. "But there's more." Another scholar, decades later, added a second note beneath it, written in darker ink, shakier hand. It says, "Those who hear it sleep without dreams until morning." The halfling's eyes widen in delight. "A comforting magic, a lullaby from the land." The mage nods. That is how the archivist described it. A natural lullaby, one not woven by spellcasters, but by the world's own quiet heart. He closes the book gently, a soft, final whisper of paper. "I have not heard it myself," he says. "But there are travelers, few but sincere, who claim they have. They say the sound is so gentle that even those who fear the cold feel peace wash through them. Their breath slows, their minds grow still, and when they wake the world feels lighter." The dwarf sits back thoughtfully. A sound like that could soothe the hardest winters. The wind outside presses closer, its muffled whisper brushing against the tavern shutters like a soft woolen blanket, dragged across wood. The mage continues quietly. One traveler wrote that the winter chime sounded like a single icicle tapping lightly beneath moonlight. Another said it reminded them of a child humming while half asleep near a hearth. Yet another described it as the soft resonance of distant chimes carried through fog. He smiles almost imperceptibly. I prefer the last description. It feels true somehow. The cartographer leans forward slightly. And did the archives offer any guidance on how to hear it? The mage chuckles softly, the sound warm and subdued. They did, actually. A final line reads, "Do not seek the chime. Simply be still when winter rests." The tavern falls into a gentle silence. Not heavy, not expectant, just peaceful. The kind of silence that allows stories to settle like snow upon a quiet roof. The halfling breaks it with a soft, bright murmur. "You know, I think every winter night carries a kind of music. Some nights it's the creak of tree branches, some nights it's the whisper of wind, and maybe, just maybe, some nights it's a chime." The mage nods softly. A chime that reminds us even the coldest lands hold warmth within their silence. A log shifts in the hearth. Amber light spills across the table, catching the bronze rings in the dwarf's beard and painting the elven cartographer's map with a faint golden glow. After a moment of soft reflection, the dwarf lifts his journal. "There is a tale I've been meaning to share," he rumbles gently. "One that pairs nicely with your chime. A story of a cavern beneath the dale. A cavern that hums." The halfling gasps quietly. "A hum? Aye?" The dwarf murmurs, his eyes warm with memory. But not a frightening one. No creature's growl, no strange magic, just a hum. Like the deep, slow sigh of the earth at rest. The fire glows, the storm whispers, the night deepens, and the dwarf prepares to tell his tale. The dwarf historian settles deeper into his chair, letting the warmth of the hearth wash gently over him. His fingertips trace the worn spine of his journal, where countless winter nights have softened the leather into something warm and familiar. He breathes slowly, his voice dropping into a deep, quiet register that seems to resonate with the wooden beams overhead. "There is a cavern," he begins, "hidden far beneath the southern cliffs of the Dale, not marked on maps, not recorded in clan lore, not even whispered among miners. It lies too deep for common tunnels, too still for wandering beasts, too quiet for anything but memory." The fire crackles softly, sending a gentle cascade of sparks upward before they vanish into the dim rafters. "I found it by accident," the dwarf continues. "Or perhaps it found me, deep beneath the stone, following an old fault line that our ancestors once explored, but abandoned for safer paths. The rock there shifts sometimes, not dangerously, but in slow ancient ways that only the earth understands." He closes his eyes briefly, remembering the scent of cold stone and deep soil. "I had been wandering for hours, with only the soft scratch of my charcoal marking my progress. The tunnels were quiet, so quiet that the sound of my own breath echoed back to me like a gentle companion." The halfling leans forward, eyes wide but peaceful. "I imagine it must have been very dark." "So it was," the dwarf replies with a warm rumble. "But dwarves know the comfort of darkness as others know the comfort of candlelight. It wraps around you like a thick cloak, steady and patient." He runs his thumb slowly along the journal's edge. "Then," he whispers, "I heard it. A hum. Very faint. So faint, in fact, that I thought it was the rumble of my own heartbeat. A single note, so low and gentle, it felt less like a sound and more like a presence." The mage's eyes brighten. "A resonant cavern?" The dwarf nods. "Aye, but unlike any I've known. This hum wasn't born of wind or shifting stone or underground rivers. It was steady, purposeful, almost patient. He clears his throat softly, the sound warm, unhurried. I followed it, step by step, letting the hum guide me down a narrow passage that seemed untouched by tools. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Not louder, but clearer. Like a whispered word, spoken just once yet echoing for ages. The cartographer shivers gently, though her expression is serene. "And what did you find?" The dwarf opens his eyes slowly, and for a moment the firelight reflects in them like molten bronze. "I found a cavern," he says, "vast and hollow, with walls as smooth as river stone. At its center stood a ring of stalagmites, 6 of them, tall and evenly spaced, as though shaped not only by nature, but by intention." He pauses, letting the soft weight of the image settle. When I stepped inside, the hum deepened. Not louder, not sharper, just deeper. It wrapped around my ribs, rested beneath my breath, and gently nudged my thoughts into stillness. The halfling's voice is a whisper. "Were you afraid?" The dwarf smiles faintly. "No. I felt at peace, as though the cavern had been waiting for someone to listen." The wind brushes lightly against the tavern shutters, like fingertips trailing across old wood. "The stalagmites," the dwarf continues, "were warm. Not hot, just warm, as though they had been holding sunlight for centuries without letting it fade. When I placed my hand upon one, the hum shifted ever so slightly, like it was acknowledging me. A soft exhale escapes the mage. "Fascinating." "Aye," the dwarf murmurs. But there was more. A pool in the center. Shallow, still, clear as polished crystal. When I knelt beside it, my lantern's glow did not reflect. Instead, the water showed something else. The cartographer leans in. "What did it show?" He answers softly with reverence. "Stone. Unbroken stone. As though the cavern above had not yet been carved into being. As though the pool remembered a time before its own existence." The others fall quiet. A quiet filled with awe, not fear. "The hum," the dwarf says, "was the cavern remembering itself, holding on to the oldest shape it ever knew. A memory of the world before cold, before snow, before even the first chisel touched the spine of the world." The fire crackles gently. A page turns somewhere behind them. The halfling breathes out slowly, as though absorbing the story into the soft rhythm of the night. "I sat there," the dwarf whispers, "for what felt like hours, listening, breathing, letting the hum soothe every restless corner of my mind. It felt like being held by the earth itself." He closes his journal gently. When I returned days later, the passage had collapsed, not violently but naturally, as though the cavern had simply decided to rest again. A silence follows, long, warm, full of soft wonder. Then the halfling clears his throat, a gentle sound. "These tales," he murmurs. "They're all so peaceful, so quiet. It's as though Icewind Dale has its own way of comforting those who take the time to listen." The mage nods slowly. The Dale has always spoken softly. "It's the world that rushes too quickly," the cartographer smiles. "Well said." The storm outside deepens, its muffled chorus blending with the hearth's warm heartbeat. And then, from a traveler seated near the far wall, a quiet voice rises. "May I share one?" the stranger asks softly. "A tale of a cabin where the snow never falls." The adventurers turn gently, welcoming the newcomer's calm voice into their circle of winter lore. The stranger rises only slightly from his seat, not standing, not drawing attention, simply leaning forward enough that the soft glow of the hearth traces the gentle lines of his face. His cloak is dusted with melting snow, and when he lifts his hands to warm them, the tiny droplets shimmer before disappearing into the air. His voice, when he speaks, is as soft as wind threading through pine needles. "I once wandered," he begins, "far beyond the northern paths, following the scent of frost-blooming moss and the glimmer of distant ice fields. During that journey, I came upon a cabin sitting alone among the drifts, small, wooden, set deep within a cradle of ancient stone." The dwarf tilts his head. "No tracks leading to it?" The stranger smiles faintly. "None. Not a single footprint. Not a single animal trail. Just a cabin that looked as though it had always been there." A quiet settles among the listeners, not the silence of caution, but the peaceful calm of a night growing even cozier around them. The fire snaps softly, a thin curl of golden smoke drifting upward before fading into the beams. "The first thing I noticed," the stranger says, "was the roof. Though the snowstorm had been heavy, no snow lay upon it. Not a dusting, not a flake. The drifts around the cabin were knee-deep, yet the roof remained perfectly bare, as though winter itself was forbidden to touch it." The cartographer's brow furrows gently. "A warm roof, perhaps, heated by a forge." He shakes his head slowly. "There was no smoke from a chimney, no scent of firewood, no glow from within. Just the cabin, quiet and untouched, resting in the pale blue light of the northern afternoon. The wind outside the tavern brushes along the shutters, the sound low and distant, like a memory wandering through snow. I approached slowly," the stranger continues, each step sinking into soft powder. The air was still, so still that my breath hung motionless before drifting down like mist. And when I reached the cabin door, I realized something else." He pauses for a long breath. The mage leans forward slightly, though his expression remains calm, serene. The halfling cradles his warm mug close to his chest. "The cabin," the stranger whispers, "was warm." The dwarf blinks. "Warm? From inside?" "No. Warm on the outside." He places his hands above the table, as though feeling phantom heat again. "The wood beneath my fingers felt like it had been touched by a long summer sun, smooth, dry, radiating a gentle warmth that spread into my palms and up my arms like a soft welcome." The cartographer whispers, "That should be impossible in the dale." The stranger nods. So I opened the door. A subtle hush falls across the tavern. Not suspense, but a deeper quiet, like fresh snow drifting onto old snow. "Inside," he says, "was a single room, dusty but peaceful. A wooden table with one chair, a small shelf holding several books whose titles had long since faded, and in one corner, a quilt folded neatly atop a simple bed frame. The fire crackles softly, its warm light shimmering along the table's surface. But what struck me most," he continues, "was the stillness. It wasn't abandoned stillness, not the stillness of neglect. It felt preserved, like the room was waiting for someone who had stepped out only moments ago." The halfling whispers, "A home without a resident." "Perhaps," the stranger says gently, "but it felt more like a memory holding itself together just a little longer." He settles back slightly, drawing a slow breath. "I sat in the chair," he says, "because it somehow felt right. And as I rested my hands upon the table, I felt the warmth again. Not from the wood this time, but from the air itself. Soft, gentle warmth. Not enough to chase away winter entirely, but enough to quiet my thoughts." Snow taps against the tavern window, a faint, rhythmic whisper. "Then," the stranger murmurs, "I heard it." a sound so delicate I nearly mistook it for my own heartbeat. A soft creak, the floorboards shifting slightly, as though someone had just walked across the room. The mage doesn't tense. He simply breathes in, slow and contemplative. "You weren't afraid?" he asks quietly. "No," the stranger replies. "It felt welcoming. A presence without form, a warmth without source. A reminder that some places remember kindness long after their keepers have gone." He folds his hands slowly. I stayed for a time, long enough to read one of the books on the shelf. The pages were brittle, but the writing, what little remained, spoke of weather patterns, herb-gathering notes, and reflections on quiet living in the northern reaches. "Nothing strange?" the cartographer asks. "Nothing at all. Just the musings of someone who loved stillness." A slow smile forms on his lips. "When I left the cabin, the roof remained bare, but the moment I closed the door behind me, a single snowflake landed upon its peak. Just one. As though winter had been waiting politely for me to finish my visit. A soft wave of warmth flows through the room, the warmth that comes when a gentle story settles into the quiet corners of one's thoughts." The dwarf lets out a peaceful sigh. "A home preserved by memory," he murmurs. "I like that. Many places in the Dale are like that," the mage adds softly. "They remember those who lived quietly and left softly." The storm outside thickens, snow brushing the tavern's stone walls like a soft broom sweeping in circles. Then the elf rests her fingers lightly on her folded map. "There is one more tale," she says quietly, "that pairs with yours. A story of a bridge that appears only on the stillest nights." Her voice drops into a hush. "A bridge made of moonlight and frost." And once more, the snowbound hearth leans into the quiet wonder of the night. The elven cartographer places her palms gently on the table, her fingertips brushing faint lines in the wood, as though tracing an invisible path. The firelight glows softly across her features, lending her a serene, almost timeless aura as she begins to speak. "There is a place," she whispers, "far beyond the trails of the 10 towns, where the tundra dips into a narrow valley, a place untouched by footprints, untouched by wind, untouched even by the sun on certain days. A quiet hollow cradled between frozen ridges. The mage inclines his head, his breath rising gently in the warm air. The locals call it the Hollow of Still Waters," she continues. "And though there is no spring, no river, no lake, it is named for water nonetheless. For once each season, only on the calmest winter nights, something strange appears there." The halfling leans in, his mug held close for warmth. "A bridge," the elf murmurs, "woven of frost and moonlight." A hush settles over the table, not of disbelief but of quiet fascination, the kind that enters the room like a gentle, uninvited guest. "I discovered it," she says softly, 3 years ago during a mapping expedition. I had set my camp near the ridge, and the night was still, so still that the smoke from my lantern rose in a perfect column before fading into the cold air. She inhales slowly, as if reliving the memory. "When I stepped out of my tent, I noticed a faint shimmer cutting across the hollow below. At first I thought it was light reflecting on ice, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was suspended a few inches above the ground." The dwarf's deep voice rumbles quietly. "Suspended? Like a walkway?" "Yes," the elf replies with a warm whisper. "A long, narrow arc, curving gently across the hollow floor. Its surface glowed faintly, soft and pale, the same color as early frost on untouched fields." The room grows still, with only the soft crackling of the hearth and the gentle sigh of snow outside, marking the passage of time. I approached slowly, she says, each step sinking softly into the powder. The air felt different there, not colder, not warmer, just attentive, like the hollow itself was aware of me. She folds her hands delicately. The bridge's surface was made of frost crystals so fine they looked like silver dust. And beneath them, threads of moonlight wove back and forth, not moving, not pulsing, just resting as though waiting for someone to cross. The halfling breathes out quietly, his eyes wide with wonder. I placed a foot upon it, the elf continues, expecting it to break. But it held, firm, steady, gentle beneath my weight. It was warmer than snow, cooler than stone, and as I took another step, I felt a subtle hum beneath my boots. The mage smiles faintly. Not a sound, a feeling. Yes, she whispers, like a memory humming far beneath the surface, not loud, not insistent, just quietly present. She brushes a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the motion slow and thoughtful. I walked until I reached the center. From there, the entire hollow spread out beneath me, a white expanse lit by the moon and wrapped in perfect stillness. The fire shifts, casting a soft glow across her map. And that, she says, is when I understood what the bridge truly was. She pauses, not dramatically but gently, letting the moment rest like snow on a quiet roof. It was a boundary, she whispers, not a bridge from one place to another, but a bridge from one moment to another. A place where the past and present touch lightly, just for a breath or two, before drifting apart again. The dwarf leans in. Did you see something of the past? Not directly, she says softly, but I felt it. A presence, kind and ancient, watching from the edge of memory. Not a spirit, more like the echo of a long-forgotten traveler who once crossed that same hollow under a moon just like that one. She closes her eyes briefly. When I turned around, the frost beneath my feet sparkled brighter, as though acknowledging my steps. The halfling sighs, a peaceful sound. That sounds beautiful. It was, she whispers. And when dawn approached, the bridge faded. The frost crystals loosened, drifting gently to the ground, as though settling into sleep. The threads of moonlight pulled themselves back into the sky, like soft ribbons being reclaimed by morning. The storm outside quiets, snow falling in slower, gentler spirals. I returned the next winter, the elf says, but the bridge did not appear. It only shows itself when the night is perfectly still, when no wind disturbs the hollow, and when the moon is clear and bright. The mage nods quietly. Nature keeps its own rituals. The dwarf smiles, his voice low. Aye, and its own promises. A long, peaceful silence follows, the kind that deepens the warmth of the hearth and slows every lingering thought until the night feels like a gentle blanket. The halfling, after some time, sets down his mug and speaks in a quiet, hopeful voice. These stories, they remind me of another place, a meadow that blooms only beneath falling snow. A strange, gentle thing. The cartographer smiles softly. A blooming meadow in the heart of winter? Yes, the halfling whispers, as though the memory itself must be handled with care. A place where flowers sleep beneath the frost and wake when the first snowflake touches their petals. The mage turns his head slowly. That sounds like a tale the Dale would be proud to keep. The halfling nods, gently, warmly, and he begins his story. The halfling holds his mug in both hands, the steam drifting upward in small, lazy swirls that disappear into the warm tavern air. His eyes soften, not with sadness, but with the tender glow of a memory long cherished. There is a meadow, he begins quietly. Far to the west of Lonelywood, hidden behind a ridge of frost-worn pines. Most travelers never see it, and those who do often pass by without realizing the secret it keeps. The dwarf settles deeper into his seat, the fire reflecting gently off the bronze rings in his beard. "It's called," the halfling whispers, "the Snowfall Garden." A calm hush spreads through the table, a quiet curiosity settling over the group. Now, the strange thing about this meadow is that it never blooms in spring, not even a single petal. In summer, it looks like any other pass of hardy winter grass. In autumn, the frost creeps in early, claiming the blades and shrubs before they ever find their color. The mage tilts his head, intrigued. "So when does it bloom?" The halfling smiles, a soft, serene smile that carries the gentleness of snowfall itself. "In winter," he says simply. "Only in winter. And only when the first snowflake of the season touches the ground." The cartographer leans forward slightly, her expression calm and luminous in the hearth's warm light. "When the first flake falls," the halfling continues, "before the storm truly arrives, the meadow awakens. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly." He places his mug down with a soft wooden thud. Tiny buds push upward through the frost-crusted soil. Little blossoms, pale blue and soft silver, unfurl themselves as though waking from a long, gentle sleep. Some call them snowdream petals. Others name them frost bells. But the gatherers simply call them the meadow's sigh. The fire crackles. A page turns somewhere in the tavern. A traveler near the door shifts their blanket softly. "The petals," the halfling says, "glow, just faintly, a soft, silvery gleam that's almost indistinguishable from moonlight on snow, and when the snowfall grows heavier they sway, not from any breeze, for the air is usually still, but from the weight of the snowflakes touching their surface." The dwarf murmurs, "Living candles, resting beneath winter." The halfling nods gently. "But here is the strangest part," he whispers. "The flowers don't die when the snow covers them. They bloom because of it. The deeper the snow grows, the brighter they glow beneath it. Some travelers say that if you kneel and press your ear to the snow-covered earth, you can hear them humming." He folds his hands, letting the warmth of the story settle. "It's not a song exactly," he murmurs. "More like soft breath, a slow, delicate hush that soothes the mind and eases the heart." The mage exhales softly, his breath rising like mist. "A natural lullaby," he says, "like the winter chime, but gentler." "Yes," the halfling agrees, "and they say that anyone who sleeps beside the Snowfall Garden on the night of the first snow will drift into dreams filled with soft colors, warm memories, and peaceful wandering." He closes his eyes briefly, as though recalling such a dream. "I slept there once," he says afterward, his voice even quieter than before. "When I woke, the snow had covered me in a perfect blanket, not cold, not harsh, just comforting, and beneath it I could feel the warmth of those tiny flowers still blooming, still humming." The cartographer smiles gently. "What a beautiful place." "It is," the halfling replies, "a place that reminds you that winter isn't only cold, it is rest, it is renewal, it is the soft lullaby of the land remembering itself." A peaceful silence settles over the group. The stories have grown softer, deeper, as though the tavern itself is sinking slowly into quiet meditation. Outside, the storm calms, snowflakes drifting in slower, more delicate spirals. The wind hums faintly, barely brushing the shutters. Everything is peaceful, a perfect cradle for one last story. The mage lifts his gaze. "There is one tale left to tell," he says softly, "a tale that ties all these wonders together." A tale not of a place but of the dale itself, and the quiet rhythm that binds one winter to the next. The dwarf nods, eyes warm. I've heard whispers of that one. The stranger folds his hands, waiting. The elf leans back in her chair, letting the fire warm her boots. The halfling smiles, as though the final story is a gift he has long awaited. And the mage, with a slow breath, lets his voice fall into a calm, dreamlike murmur. "It is the tale," he whispers, "of the silent hour, the moment when all of Icewind Dale takes a single breath. The tavern stills, quiet as falling snow, and the final story begins." The mage places both hands around his mug, letting the faint warmth seep into his palms as his gaze drifts toward the frost-lined window. Snow falls softly now, slow spirals of white, each flake wandering down as though reluctant to disturb the quiet. His voice, when it comes, is a deep whisper, steady and soothing. "There is a moment," he begins, "that settles upon the dale once each winter. Not every winter night, not even every winter storm. It comes only when the land itself grows still enough to remember how to breathe." The dwarf nods almost imperceptibly, as though he has felt this moment before. The others lean closer, not with tension, but with a soft, dreamlike calm. It is called the Silent Hour. Snow brushes gently against the tavern shutters, a faint, rhythmic hush that blends with the crackling of the hearth. "It does not begin at any fixed time," the mage continues, "nor does it announce itself. It simply arrives, winding through the dale like a soft ribbon of breath." He closes his eyes briefly. During the silent hour, all sound fades. Not completely. The world never truly falls mute, but everything grows softer. The wind hums lower. The trees settle. Even the snowflakes seem to fall more delicately, as though afraid to interrupt the moment. A soft sigh drifts around the table, though none of the adventurers can be sure who made it. "And when that stillness arrives," the mage murmurs, "the dale breathes, a deep, gentle breath, a breath felt, not heard." He touches his chest lightly, his movements slow and peaceful. Some say the silent hour is when the dale listens, to its rivers, to its stones, to the footsteps of travelers long gone and long remembered. His tone drifts softer still. Others believe that during this hour, the land gathers its memories. The hum of ancient caverns, the glow of winter meadows, the tread of invisible footprints on frozen mirrors, the warmth of cabins preserved by kindness, the shimmer of moonlit bridges, all of these, he whispers, are woven together into a single, quiet breath that carries the dale from one winter to the next. The halfling's eyes flutter half-closed, lulled by the cadence of the mage's voice. The elf rests her elbows gently on the table, her fingers interlaced loosely, her posture relaxed and serene. The stranger sits very still, as though listening not only to the story, but to the snow outside, measuring its soft rhythm. The dwarf speaks in a low murmur. "Have you felt it?" The mage smiles. "A few times, always unexpectedly. Never when I sought it. It came only when I was quiet enough to notice." He gazes into the fire. "One winter, I was camped beside a frozen lake. The world was deep in darkness, the stars scattered above me like silver dust upon black velvet. I had been reading, the soft scratch of my quill blending with the distant wind. Then suddenly, the wind fell silent. A log shifts in the hearth, sending a small ripple of golden light across the tavern floor. I lifted my head," the mage says softly, "and the world had paused, not stopped, not frozen, paused." As though Icewind had taken a long, deep inhale, holding the moment gently in its hands. He stretches his fingers slightly, as though feeling the memory again. I felt a warmth, just beneath the cold. A warmth so subtle it was easy to mistake it for one's own heartbeat. A warmth that said, "You are not alone. Rest." The halfling closes his eyes fully now, breathing with slow, even rhythm. The elf's shoulders loosen, her posture softening as though settling into a comfortable dream. The dwarf watches the fire quietly, his stern features softened by the glow of the hearth. The mage continues, his voice barely above a whisper. The silent hour lasted no more than a minute, perhaps less. But in that time, every worry, every restless thought, every burden felt lighter, as though the snow itself were lifting them and carrying them gently into the night. The storm outside grows faint, its murmurs dissolving into softer breaths of wind. The tavern glows warmly, a sanctuary wrapped in firelight and ancient stories. The wooden beams overhead creak softly, not from weight, but from peacefulness. When the silent hour ends, the mage says, the world resumes its rhythm. The wind returns. The snow falls as before, but something within you remains quieter, as though you too have taken a deeper breath. He sets his mug down slowly. And travelers say that if you are blessed with hearing or feeling the silent hour, then the dale remembers you from that moment on. You become part of its gentle lore. A soft quiet settles over the table, the kind that lingers like the final notes of a lullaby. Warmth from the hearth mixes with the tranquil scent of aged wood and faint mountain herbs. Outside, the snow continues to drift, lighter now, more delicate, as though preparing the land for a long night of rest. The mage folds his hands in his lap. In the end, he whispers, I think that is what all these tales spell out. The dale is not harsh, not cruel, not lonely. It is quiet, it is patient. It holds its stories in soft hands. His eyes grow heavy, just as it holds us now. The fire dims slightly, settling into a slow, steady glow, perfect for sleep. The tavern murmurs with gentle sounds, a page turned calmly, a mug set down lightly, the faintest rustle of wool. The dwarf closes his journal. The halfling's breaths deepen. The elf leans back, letting her eyes fall half shut. The stranger warms his hands once more, his posture peaceful. And then, in a voice soft as falling snow, the mage finishes, May the silent hour find you as well, and may its gentle breath carry you peacefully into dreams. The tavern grows quiet, the storm softens, and the night embraces everything in a warm, timeless hush, a perfect cradle for drifting softly, slowly, into sleep.